I'd like to welcome Tommy Fenster to the AgEmerge stage. Tommy has done some amazing work right here in the Central Valley of California, really analyzing what is going on with soil health in a systems approach, realizing that putting things into compartments and into tight silos, you can't determine what is really going on in a whole system. So it's really interesting in Tommy's approach and how he went out and worked with growers with complete systems compared to conventional systems. And plus, Tommy is actually one of the offshoots of Jonathan Lundgren, who spoke with us at our very first AgEmerge. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this, looking at what the system implications are regarding regenerative ag.
All right, thank you for tuning in today. My name is Tommy Fenster. I am a graduate student researcher with the Ecdysis Foundation and Cal State East Bay. Just a little bit summary of the Ecdysis Foundation. The Ecdysis Foundation and Blue Dasher Farm is an active nonprofit research facility that's based in South Dakota and is doing research around the country and even up in Canada, working to do research on topics that are relevant to regenerative producers. As part of Ecdysis, there's also a working farm called Blue Dasher Farm. We're actually implementing regenerative practices in South Dakota. So now that little summary is out of the way, today I'm going to be speaking about the role of science with regards to agriculture and in particular regenerative agriculture. So really, when we're talking about science and regenerative agriculture, really need to think about where these questions and the motivating drivers are coming from. And this is really the farmers themselves. It's the farmers out there who are innovating with these new agricultural techniques, whether it's the integration of interseeding and cover cropping and no-till, organic amendments, or integrating grazers into the orchards, compost teas. It's the farmers who are really pushing the way and leading the way. And really the big challenge, and as for us as scientists, is to catch up to these farmers who are really pushing the boundaries and figure out ways in which we can quantify what they are doing, how effective it is, and do it in a way in which we can help create roadmaps for other farmers who may want to emulate these farmers who are truly pushing and leading the way. So yeah, the farmers are really where our questions come from in terms of how we frame the research that we're doing. So before we get in too far, let's just kind of do a brief summary of what is regenerative agriculture for maybe some of you who aren't quite so familiar with it. So the overall idea, the most important part is that we want to create good food, good crops, as well as be a profitable operations for the farmer. It doesn't really matter how many agroecological principles or how innovative a farm is, if at the end of the day they can't walk away making a profit and being a successful operation. Though it's a little bit different with regenerative agriculture, is instead of having synthetic inputs be the drivers for that food or for that profit, the baseline for regenerative agriculture is that by building good soil quality as well as biodiversity, we're going to be creating a robust and diverse agroecosystem that can provide a lot of these environmental services that we typically think of synthetic inputs providing to the farm. And so, you know, by doing things like cover crops, integrating grazers, stacking operations, using organic amendments and compost teas, you know, as we were able to maybe eliminate some of those cost-heavy synthetic inputs, what we're doing is maybe we're even increasing our profits as we can reduce our input costs. Having this biodiversity of our plant community and then the company invertebrates provide pest control for us, and even potentially, you know, produce food where the end result is healthier for the farming community as well. So that's what we're looking for with regards to the outcome of regenerative agriculture, is to really use soil health and biodiversity to help drive our profits and nutrient density. So with that covered, let's just go over briefly some of the key principles of regenerative agriculture. It really starts with eliminating soil disturbance. So then it's really mostly tilling. We don't want to be breaking up those aggregates, allowing that soil to erode, or allowing the release of carbon up into the atmosphere, or the loss of nutrients that's disturbing the soil. But the key thing about regenerative agriculture is not about just doing one practice. It's about stacking our practices as well, so that we're taking an entire systems approach, an entire shift in how we're actually farming. The key part with that is then, in addition to not tilling, is not leaving the soil bare. When the soil is bare, we leave it vulnerable to erosion, and to heating up, getting too hot for the microbes, and even having losses of some of our key nutrients and carbon as well. And then, next part is that we really want to bring diversity into the system. Some diversity is better than none, and more is always better than less. Plant diversity is what drives the overall diversity for the entire system, and the plants are also the way in that energy also enters our system. So we want to have a diverse amount of plants in our system. It's going to overall make the system more resistant to pathogens coming in, as well as drive our invertebrate biodiversity, which is going to also help provide some of our pest control as we have these more complex, these complex ecosystems. And then the final part is, a key part is combining our crops and our livestock operation. A lot of our crops, all that we grow really evolved over time with having animals graze and being a part of that system. And over the course of time, really much more recently than later, we've really kind of brought these apart. So we really want to bring these livestock back in to the system. This can speed up nutrient cycling. It makes sense to have, instead of maybe bringing in manures or fertilizer, if we can have the animals come in and graze the cover crop, or between the alley rows of an orchard or a vineyard, and really bring that nutrients, and also allow the farmer to potentially stack those enterprises and diversify their economic stream as well too. Because as we come back to the idea of regenerative agriculture, is to have economic success as well. So moving on, so how did the Ecdysis Foundation, in particular the founder of the foundation, Dr. John Lundgren, who's one of my advisors and my primary advisor on this project. So how did he get into this? Really, he came about it is about around 5 years ago. He started a project and was going to look and see if cover crops can replace insecticides. And what they did, was a very standard sort of scientific experiment, component-based, which we're going to integrate in cover crops, have no cover crops, so 4 with cover crops, 4 with bare soil, do a standard herbicide regime, standard varieties, standard cover crops blends, planting dates, all this stuff, and just compare what is that impact of the cover crops. And what happened was they found that this project, it failed. It wasn't really effective. They weren't really seeing the successes that are supposedly come along with this type of experiment. So the idea, though, is that farmers who are integrating cover crops, they just weren't integrating cover crops. The thing that the farmers were doing is that they were taking an overall systems approach. So integrating cover crops and livestock, as well as no-till, bringing around diversity into their borders. So it really came with regards to this is that, when you're isolating a particular problem, trying to just look at this one component, you lose the big picture. We're not seeing how these pieces are interacting, coming together, how this whole system is really operating. It also really misrepresents what's happening in the field. And with farmers, they do this sort of study and say, this doesn't work. But that's not really how the farmers are doing. They're saying, yeah, but I'm not just doing cover crops, or I'm not just doing no-till. I'm doing this variety of things. So what's really then is up to science is then to not be restricted by only doing this component, solely looking at these singular component-based experiments. These kind of experiments are still important. They do serve a role, but there's also needs to be a place for a greater systems-based approach to the scientific process with regards to quantifying these innovative type of operations. And what this means is that we require this different approach, and this is that systems approach. And as you can see here, this is a picture of a regenerative almond orchard from the study that we're doing right now on the left with the green, and then the conventional on the right. This is not photoshopped or anything whatsoever. They just happen to be right next to each other, and these are really convenient study locations. But the idea is that the farmer on the left, so not only does he have ground cover, he's also using organic amendments as well too. allowing that biomass to get up, avoiding the inputs of herbicides as well as insecticides. So it's really a lot more is going into that system on the left than just simply having that ground cover. Also, the regenerative orchard also beat that conventional one in yields by quite a bit. But anyway, so for these system levels projects, it means scale. So it means everything in terms of scale, in terms of the scientific sampling that we're doing. So sampling soil quality, so all the way down from our deep soil carbon and nitrogen through the soil macro and micro nutrients to the soil microbial community, then up into the invertebrate communities. You can see here in this picture, you have 2 undergraduates who worked on this project. Chris Bradley is helping us take soil samples. That went down to 60 centimeters, which we're looking at carbon and nitrogen. And then on the left, moving up, we have Ali, who was sampling for the invertebrate community at the ground level. And then not only that is not only interdisciplinary with regards to our scientific approach of soil science and entomology and ecology, but then also going out and then also bringing in the sociological and economic components of the farm as well too, because a farm is not just the biology. We have humans, we have economics, we have all these different drivers that are going into the farm. So the idea is we want to try to sample throughout these different components and then understand what's driving the results. If we do see differences between these regenerative and conventional orchards, how is it going on? What are the interactions that's having? Is it invertebrate community that's diverse and robust? Is it helping build up fertility in the soil by potentially breaking down some of this organic matter? Is it helping provide the pest control, which is allowing the farmers to save money? So it's going throughout the entire system, and then also remembering that farms have humans on them as well, and not forgetting to integrate that component as well. And let's go back. And then really where that comes from is, so where do our questions come from? And for this systems level project, these questions, they come from the farmers themselves. We really cannot emphasize this enough. Sometimes too often, research can be driven kind of maybe by particular interests, but with not enough stakeholder farmer engagement. And we want to go out and talk to the farmers in the field and say, what are the issues that you're having with? And right now we're hearing farmers who are like, okay, we see that these regenerative systems are doing pretty well, but how can we transition? How quickly will this happen? When can I start to see some of this pest control potentially that comes with some of this biodiversity? So it's really doing this project, but making sure that you're engaging with the person who it matters to most, and that's the farmers themselves. So, the overall idea is, right now, our modern agricultural system, unfortunately, can be some of these major causes of pollution, biodiversity loss, as well as negative health impacts on the surrounding community. But there's a ton of farmland, and there's a lot of potential with this massive impact of farmland. Is for farmland to be a major part of the solution on how we're going to offset carbon emissions, produce healthier foods, and create overall healthier communities and more robust farming economies and local economies as we move forward into the future. And a big part of this is with climate change. We are engaging, at least here, we are going to be dealing with more severe and intense sort of weather events. In California, it seems to be that what we're going to be having is less frequent rain events, but when we do have them, they're going to be much more intense. So it's really going to be about figuring out farming in which we can doing management when we do get that rain is not all running off, that we're taking advantage of it. It's getting trapped in the farm, it's recharging our groundwater, it's helping the farms adapt to this changing environment. It's bringing in biodiversity and having our farms be these resources for the ecosystem. And by doing that, we can eliminate some of these inputs and also being assets to the community. I know right now in California, there's been studies looking at the impact of pesticides as well as glyphosate, and those impacts on children in developing of autism spectrum disorders or other sort of intellectual disabilities. And it's actually, it's really quite concerning. So we can create healthier communities as well where people are working. I think that's a big benefit. And that's, with regenerative agriculture and some of this beginning of the research, it really potentially seems that the farm can be part of the solution for a lot of these issues that we're facing. So to do a little bit of a pitch now for my longer presentation, a little bit of insight about how this is actually applying in California. Right now what we're doing is we're just finishing writing up the results in the paper for this 2-year study in which we compared regenerative and conventional almond production in California. What we did, we went out, we found 8 regenerative farms, and we found 8 conventional neighbors, and we sampled everything from soil carbon and nitrogen through the macro micronutrients, microbial community, through invertebrate community, the impact of pest damage and the economics on these variety of these orchards. And we found some exciting results. And I'll do a brief summary of it here, but if you want to learn more about this, recommend tuning in or linking up to that other longer presentation. And overall, the findings of this is that the regenerative orchards had better soil quality metrics, greater biodiversity, and similar yields to the conventional orchards while being more profitable. It looks like, what we had in this, we found that there's significant correlation between invertebrate and arthropod diversity and reduced pest damage. And it looked like by doing practices like maintaining permanent ground cover, using organic amendments, that these regenerative orchards are actually gaining soil carbon while the conventional orchards were losing the soil carbon over the years. I mean, if you look at that last picture, it's not terribly surprising, that bare soil events are prone for erosion and losing carbon. Another key thing, we found these significant correlations between the biological community and the soil quality metrics. So significant correlations between the microbial and invertebrate community, as well as our soil carbon and our phosphorus and our reduced bulk density. So it looks like these are all sort of interacting together. The invertebrate community and the microbial community are driving better soil quality, and then, and vice versa, that improves soil quality, creating an overall better environment for these microbes. So they're all really intertwined. We have this system, this interconnected system that's really bringing out these environmental services. Looking at this, in terms of a key management practice, maintaining the orchard floor ground coverage is sort of the key thing if farmers want to maintain carbon within it. But then looking at this, we were able to do a statistical analysis and looking at, these other regenerative practices, which are the main ones that were driving the differences. And we really saw that they really came down to in these farms, the avoiding of synthetic inputs, this permanent ground cover, and the use of these organic amendments and compost teas. And what's also interesting too is looking at that stacking principle. We found significant correlations throughout the whole range of metrics between the more regenerative practices farms use and improve variables that we were quantifying. So, really pretty some exciting stuff, but something that we'll go into a little bit more in a longer presentation. As you can see, it's really, science can be a key tool for helping shape the direction of agriculture. It's about knowing what works, what doesn't work, going out there, collecting the data, and getting good information behind it. And it can be really useful tool for the farmers themselves. Overall, so a little bit of context, a little bit more of what the Ecdysis I went to in the beginning and what what's trying to accomplish to do. You can see here, this is where the research facility and the farm is based in South Dakota. And the idea is that there's a working farm that has to make a profit every year. And it's helped the scientists to understand, how do you farm? What are the issues that farmers are dealing with? And the idea is to have to have these centers around the country and to provide resources to farmers from California, Colorado, Illinois, all across Iowa, all across the country to fill this important resource for farmers who really want to push it, but in a lot of cases they don't necessarily have that scientific support behind them. And then the strategy is to go out and to quantify what's going on in current regenerative food systems that are out there. And then from there, once we quantify the difference between the current system, is to go out and to evaluate the transition. How does someone transition from conventional to regenerative? And then from there, not only publish the scientific papers that go along with it, but to create information which is digestible and accessible to the farmers themselves. Overall, here within California, what we have done is we've validated, it looks like, regenerative almond production in the Central Valley in California with this initial study. And now really the next step is to go a little bit further south in the Central Valley and then evaluate how to farm almond orchards in California and transition from this conventional to this regenerative operation. And at the same time, building these long-standing relationships with the farmers and the ag community out here in California to really, be a resource for California almond orchards. However, for this study though, we need your help. So next phase of the study is going to be starting later this spring, and we're actually still recruiting farms. So if you are a producer and you have a regenerative orchard in the southern part of the Central Valley, so more towards the Bakersfield area, or you have an orchard and you're interested in transitioning from conventional to regenerative, we would love to work with you on these next phases of the study. The key part is, we share all of our data with the farmers in the study and really try to work to be partners and build these long relationships so that we can be a resource for you for the years to come. Yeah, the idea is for science to really to help the farmers and the beekeepers. If you are interested in reaching out, this is the website of the Ecdysis of the Scientific Foundation. Blue Dasher Farm is the for-profit farm enterprise. There is Dr. Lundgren's email. My email is just below that. Feel free to reach out to either one of us with an email, and we'll work with you as best as we can. And on that, I want to say thank you so much, the Ecdysis team. I'm just one member here. It's a really big team filled with undergrads, graduate students, techs, really everybody, and a lot of great donors as well who've been supporting this work. So thank you very much.